Yeah, I better cut mine off. I'm glad that happened. Let me set this off.
Well, we are live here today with episode 11 of In the Huddle. Today's episode with Ray Hamilton and Tony McGee is brought to you by Mark Cruz and family. Over the years, Mark has supported Patriots alumni with mentoring and advice, and along with his family has participated in all of our events and programs. Patriots and alumni and its impact on the community would not exist without Cruz. Thank you, Mark Cruz and family. Tony McGee. Mac. Well, I'm telling you, Tony, I'm having so much fun reconnecting with all of our teammates and sharing you guys back with the fans that were, I don't know, some of them might not even have been born when we were playing back in the 70s, but it's been so much fun to reconnect with everybody. And I thank you very much for coming on board. We got a little technical hiccup, or Ray Hamilton would be here with us. We're working on that as we speak, so we might as well carry the show without him for right now.
Oh, we don't need Ray. Let's forget about it.
He just get tangled up and rolled up anyway. So anyway, wonderful to see you, Tony.
You know, Pete, and I'm kind of doing this kind of same thing. And you know what? You really realize that our friendship and our familyship goes way back. And it never ends. And, you know, you speak to different individuals, you get an opportunity to look at those people that you were in war with, then you look at how it has manifested and how we've changed. But at the same time, we still can have that feeling in our heart for each other.
Yeah, no question. That same locker room sense that we all experienced when we were, and you know what, when I first got there in 76, I don't know if you noticed, but I was a little green behind the ears. I wasn't exactly what you'd call worldly, and you know, to be thrust in that locker room with guys my age, and then looking at guys that Bucko Kilroy and Chuck Fairbanks brought in, some experience like you. I remember George Webster. You know, he was that guy, that experienced guy that Bob McKay came in from Cleveland. So that the young guys, you know, like you know, the draft of '73 that brought in John Hanna and Sam Cunningham and Darryl Stingley, and then the '76 draft with Mike Haynes, me, and Timmy Fox, you know. But to be able to sprinkle that in, I think it was genius for them to have enough veteran presence in there to kind of direct all the young talent that they were bringing in.
You know, a lot of people never realize that. And Pete, you made a very good point there, for the simple aspect that was when New England Patriots became a team that was diversified, brought in a lot of good players from other parts of the country, and they learned to mesh together. Our one problem was we never won the big one. And at that same time, that's when the Steelers were hot. So that's why you never hear as much about those teams. But Pete, as you'll remember, we had very good teams there. And they brought people in, like you say, Bob McKay had a big joke for everything. The big guy from Texas, George Dirty Bird Webster, one of the best linebackers that ever come out in the game, but no one knew about it. Zabel, Kane could run all day. I mean, I'm talking defensive player. You guys had good players too, even though we carried y'all everywhere you went.
You guys see me now?
There he is, Ray Hamilton. Finally.
What's that, Suge?
Tony,
I can see you, Suge.
About you.
Can you see my handsome face now?
Yes. Yes.
Well, we can see your face. I don't know about that first part.
The handsome part. All right, good to be here. How you guys doing?
Man, you look just like your son, man. I'm telling you.
Good thing you got here. Ray, good thing you got here when you did. Tony was just about to badmouth you.
Oh, bad time.
He's good at that. Hey, let's get one thing straight, Pete, before we start this thing, okay?
Hey, Pete, what did I tell you?
Pete, you know, Fritz and Hank was coaching those other guys, but I was coaching Tony, okay? I just you know that. Chuck Fairbanks told me when we got him, make sure that you coach Tony McGee. All right? That's what I did.
It's too bad. It's too bad they didn't know you didn't know what you were doing.
I was faking it pretty good, though.
You know what, though? And you know what, Ray? But that's the one thing, Peter. I don't know if you ever knew this, but all of them, and Parcells and Hank and Fritz, they came. Me and Ray started making up our own games for the defensive line, and they allowed us to do that. And I always remember with Hank when I came from Chicago, how he made me really a player. He took each and every one of us and said, "Remember, Ray, use your best move, and always say that for the big time in the game." So Ray didn't teach me, but we learned together.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they, the thing about which is speaks of Hank and Fritz and their coaching and stuff like that. They gave us the freedom to do what we wanted to do. We used to call our own games during the game and stuff like that. They gave us that leeway to do that, and that really helped us quite a bit.
Yeah, no question. And it only, I remember later in careers when Steve Grogan was calling his own game,
right?
They weren't signaling it from the sidelines anymore. They might suggest things, but Steve would step in the huddle and he'd say, "O-line, I need 4 yards. What do you got?" And we'd say, "I don't know, ride 34." And you broke the huddle, telling the guy you were going to get him 4 yards. That's a whole bunch different than hearing a play come in from the sideline and wondering, are these people watching the same game I'm playing in? It put that onus on each one of us. He'd come in and say, "Stanley, can you beat him on a dig in the first quarter or on a fake?" And Stanley'd say, "No, not yet." He'd ask Irving Fryer that, and Irving Fryer was always open. But he'd ask Stanley that, and he could count on the fact that Stanley was going to tell him the truth. And much like what you guys were calling your own games up front with the twists and all that kind of stuff, but it blended with what was called in the huddle, I'll bet you. When Nelly was calling the defense with the secondary coverage and stuff, you guys were smart enough to know you had to have somebody on outside contain, and if it weren't going to be the outside backer, was going to have to be one of you guys twisting into that hole.
Right. And to piggyback on that a little bit, I coached with Raymond Berry there in '85 to '90, and Grogan, even though he wasn't starting, he was calling when Tony Eason was in the game. Grogan was calling the plays. Raymond Berry let Grogan call the plays. I always thought that we had a bunch of guys during my era that could have gone into coaching. Tony McGee would have been a great defensive line coach in the league. I thought Grogan would have been a very good coordinator, offensive or quarterback coach. Those guys, Nelly went into coaching briefly and got out, but they just never got that chance. I thought we had a lot of guys back then. Once I got into coaching and saw what it was all about, and I said, these guys could be coaches very easily in this league.
Well, and I bet a lot of those guys took a look at it like you, Ray. You had to get indoctrinated to the whole thing too, and it wasn't like you just ended up with one team. You were 5 years with the Patriots before you started island hopping through the NFL, and that's tough, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely tough. I coached for 27 years with about 7 or 8 teams. It's tough. It's tough on your family. Tony just mentioned my son, my oldest son, Kadar. He was a freshman in Massachusetts. He was a sophomore in Knoxville, Tennessee. He was a junior in Tampa, and then he was a senior in LA.
Oh my goodness!
So he ended up going, getting a scholarship to Stanford. So he did okay, but
exactly.
They move around a lot though.
But and I was telling Pete before you got on, Ray, that the one thing about our team, that was the beginning of the dynasty at that time. We just never won the big one. Seemed like something always would stop us from winning it. But when you had a conglomeration of players such as we did, we knew we could win every game. We knew we had the talent. It was always something to hold it back. But when you look at it, it always comes down to who goes to the Super Bowl and who do not. At that time, Pittsburgh was our nemesis. And they always win. We would probably be the Hall of Fame guys had they not gone to all the Super Bowls. I mean, I remember when Pete came in, #1 draft choice. Hey, Pete, now I'm going to just have to ask you this right now. You mean you haven't gone and found Too Strong and hit him with a bat or something the way he used to, Too Strong used to hit you sometimes?
He hit me in practice one, knocked me out. Knocked me out.
He took pride in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have just cut him, let him.
Well, you remember,
I was stupid enough to stand there and pass block against him while he was head slapping me.
oh, Pete, you know what, Pete? I gained so much respect for you when you did that, because that dude, wait, remember his rookie speech? My name is Greg Two-Stone Boyd. I've been 605 pounds and I'm not singing again.
But you know, the thing about you, Pete, when you came in, even though Greg was kicking your ass a little bit there, you always got back and went back in there and said, let me try it again. Let me go one more time. Because you were very eager to learn and very eager to get it right, which is what the kind of guys that we had.
Well, thank you for that. You remember I came in late. I was part of that the college all-star football game that they played against. We played the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it was always the first preseason game of the year. So I was up in Evanston, Illinois for the first 2 weeks in training camp and came in, 2 weeks late. So I was already behind when it happened. So anyway, yeah.
I played in that game, Pete. It was about a year or two after that they stopped having that game, correct?
I played in the last one, Tony.
Okay, I thought so. I remember that the Chicago Tribune All-Star game. Yeah. Best 48 players in the country.
Well, I don't know. There were 47 of them anyway. I was there.
Wait a minute, Ray. He was getting ready to say he don't remember. He remembered the number right away.
Yeah, but it was. When you think about it, you bring up Pittsburgh, but when we played them in '76, we played them in '78. We beat them. You talk about the Oakland Raiders, which was another team of the AFC that was dominant. We beat them every time we showed up and played them, except for that playoff game. But that was Ben Dreith beating us that time. But
a whole lot of stuff happened that game. Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole lot of stuff happened in the game.
But we talk about the old time. Do you guys see, and you tell me what you see with the players of the day? I just see that they're well paid for potential, but at the same time, they're not as durable as we are. I don't know if they're really as smart, because one thing the players were back at that time, they were pretty smart. It just seemed like these new wave players, they pay them for potential. They don't play if they get hurt. Then they done with a career and they make Hall of Fame.
Yeah, they do have I think the Hall of Fame is definitely diluted, without a doubt. But these players today now don't get the same type of urgency and coaching and stuff that we have. A lot of these guys are, I don't say prima donnas, but it kind of stems from the coaches. The league has gone down with a lot of young coaches, and a lot of these guys are afraid to make corrections and stuff like that. I see so many just fundamental things, up front, like losing containment on passes and stuff like that, and then coverage, and maybe the coverages and stuff are more complex now, because I see a lot of busted coverages and guys running wide open, no one's covering them. So it's a different ball game now.
Well, you were both part of a big transition. Back in '76 when I broke in, primarily it was 4-3 defense, middle linebacker, cover one. And if they wanted to do something fancy, they'd drop into cover two and zone everything in front of them, or a man free type of a defense. And then they started running overs and unders. And then Ray Hamilton, you came in, that Okie defense, the 3-4 defense that Chuck brought with him from Oklahoma and in college football transition, that was just weird for everybody. You cover the center, you uncover the guards, and play stick'em football. And so you guys were a big part of that transition.
Yeah, Miami office had messed with it a little bit, but Chuck Fairbanks' thinking was that we had after our first year, Tony wasn't there that first year, he came in '74. After that first year, Chuck figured that we had, 3 good linemen. We had Mel Lunsford, we had Julius Adams, and myself. Mm-hmm. So rather than waste another body, we had better linebackers. So, and we had in Oklahoma, we had run the 3-4 defense. That was our main defense, especially in college. And most colleges ran the same defense. So we were the first team to go to the 3-4 as our number one stable defense. And then we used 4-down linemen on passing downs on 3rd down. That's when Tony would come in and we would do all that stuff.
Yeah.
I marvel a lot of times, Ray, at what you do. I watch these players now, and I remember when they look at players right now, if a player have 30 tackles a year, they doing well. And you at 240 pounds had 99 tackles one year. And I
Yeah.
used to always marvel at how you played and for you to play at that size. And the thing about it, then I started looking down the line and I remember Copenhagen, who could run and stay real low. He got hurt, remember him? And
Yeah.
then we had Tricky Dick, Richard Bishop, who they could never figure him out. Big Julius was always strong. We had people that were put into a situation, and that's the one thing that Hank and everyone else did that we were with. They put us in the situation to win. But you know the thing about it, when you don't win the Super Bowl, as we said, we led the team 2 out of 3 years in the league in sacks. We led the whole league, but nobody ever knew it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that you mentioned the Raiders earlier, Pete. And we used to beat the Raiders because we matched up well with the Raiders. We were a smaller defensive line, fast. They couldn't stay with us. They couldn't pick up our game. We would sack Stabler 5-6 times every time we played them.
Right.
But they beat us in the one game that counted.
Yep, they did.
You know?
I wouldn't say they beat us. I would say that we want a recount.
They don't recount those things, but
Hey, wait a minute. I'm waiting for it now. That was in '76.
right. And everybody said that the Tuck rule in that 2001 playoff game got back at him, had nothing to do with us. So it's still out there.
No, nothing to do with
You mentioned that a lot of things happened in that game that with 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes to go in the game, we still had the football. We were driving, and we jumped off sides on a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2, and never picked up that first down. Had to punt the ball away, or they'd have never got the ball back.
But in that 3rd down, though, you got Billy Piano clearly holding on to Russ Francis. Clearly, Stevie Wonder could have called that.
Well, the ball hit him square in the chest, and Russ couldn't get his hands up to catch it because he got him pinned behind him.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder could have made that call, but they didn't call it.
Well, they didn't want to, because if you think about it, that time the Raiders was the just win baby team, and then we were the young Patriots coming up, and we had a volatile quarterback, and we had a bunch of guys that they put together. But at the same time, when you look at what they manifested from there, we outplayed it. It took Ben Drive to make a bad call for them to win the game. And I say it was a bad call. I know the whole thing, but at the same time, when your game swings on that, now we're talking about 2 bad calls in a row on crucial drives. So therefore, we were better than them.
No, without a doubt.
We beat them 48-17 in Foxborough, and that was the only loss they had of the year.
And next year, beat them on a Sunday night, a Monday night game too again. So we matched up well with them. We wouldn't. Art, I know Art very well, and Art has told me, man, we used to have hard time blocking you guys. You guys were tough on us. So yeah.
Art would always, and it's funny. We must have. The time I saw him, I was at Upshaw's wedding, and that's the one thing he said. You guys were the smartest, toughest, smallest, good team defensive line we've ever played. Mm-hmm. And he used to say that every time they saw us. And I marvel and I look back at how the specialties and how each of the guys had something that they did well, and everybody contributed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just that's a shame, but anyway.
Pete, since we carried the whole team, you can talk a little bit about the offense if you want to.
Well, I'd like. Oh no, we've had plenty of offense. I've had Sam Cunningham, Steve Grogan, John Hanna, but I had Mike Haynes and Ray Claiborne on this thing too. So we got I had Stanley Morgan. Stanley Morgan. Let's talk about him for a second. Here's a guy who was the fastest wide receiver to 10,000 yards. Did it sooner than anybody else in history. Played a 16-year career and averaged 19.2 yards a catch. There's nobody in the league with those kind of. And again, he didn't play on a Super Bowl winning football team, and he should be in the Hall of Fame with those kind of statistics, and he's not. That's just, I think it's a shame. And he was a great player, and we were fortunate to have him on our football team.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Stanley was, especially after we had left those early years in the early 80s, Stanley was all they had. They practically targeted him every, throwing. They targeted him every single pass, and he still caught a bunch of passes.
Right.
And you know what double jeopardy was? If you look back in history right now, it was 2 receivers in the top 7 that averaged over 19 or 50 or whatever, 15 yards a catch. And it was Stanley and H.J.
Yeah, 2-9.
2-9, Road Dog.
2-9.
And then in 79, when we were running the ball as effectively as we're, in 79, the two of them caught 1,000 yards. And I think they're the first 2,000-yard combo receivers in the history of the NFL. I could be mistaken with that, but that was a special statistic.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we did. Just like Tony said, we're just shorter. The Patriots still hold the record for the most rushing yards during the season.
Got beat this year. Got beat in 2019. The Baltimore Ravens finally beat that.
Who did?
Did they? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
For 41 years, so yeah, we could run the football.
Yeah.
And watching Bam and Andy Johnson and Donnie Calhoun and Horace Ivory and Ike Forte, it was almost like open a new can of running backs and see what they could do behind the offensive line.
Yeah.
Well, you just look at, and that's the one thing that Big Fair was good at. Other than having Ray Hamilton on the team, he didn't make many mistakes. And
give him one mistake.
We used to call Ray. We used to call it the Sun. From the Sun.
He had to line up behind Zabel for that name. We had Zabe on with Nelly a couple weeks ago, and that was worth a few yucks.
Zabe. Is Zabe still in Oklahoma?
Yeah, Zabe's still in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He was up here coaching with Nelly for, 4 or 5 years at Curry College. Nelly brought him up and coached with him up here. I think Mosey was on that staff as well. So that was fun. Hey, Ray, you were around this league for a long time, and I want to ask you. And everybody makes a big deal of, man, the game's changed. And you've seen it from a player. We already outlined you were part of that 3-4 conversion or that transition in the league. You played it for a long time, and then you coached it. Is the game that much different now than it was back then? According to me, there's only so many ways you can run at the 4-hole, and you might have to line up people a little bit differently. But when it's all said and done, it still boils down to being able to block and tackle.
Without a doubt, yeah. It's a little bit different now, a little bit more complex now with the 4 and 5 receivers and the spread offense and the holding rules are really, really different now. Offensive linemen, the referees really are very lenient in calling offensive holding and defensive holding, but it's different from the aspect that the players are just so much bigger and faster now. Guys like myself and Tony, those guys, some strong safeties are as big as we are, outside linebackers, and they run 4-5 and stuff like that. So it's a lot different from that point of view, quite a bit. The size of the players, the impacts are much. I just noticed a lot of injuries this year. I don't know whether it's because they didn't have training camp or whatever, but the impacts are much, much more greater than they were when we were playing. The concussion factor is there now with players because the collisions are just so much more violent.
Do you think it's that much more violent, or do you think they're not conditioned to take a hit?
That's where I feel.
It's a little bit of both.
Just thinking, when we went to training camp, there were 6 preseason games, and we could go in 2 weeks before the first preseason game. Now, it wasn't like we were there for 8 weeks, but we were there for the majority of that time. We were in training camp, and it was half line in the morning, and it was 1-on-1 pass rush in the afternoon, and it was no joke. We're going to learn how to, and we conditioned ourselves to hit. We could take a hit. We had concussions. Mm-hmm. We did, but you kind of. I think there's part of the factor is the lack of being conditioned to take a hit.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it also, because because now you can only practice in full pads so many times during training camp.
Well, you know,
And then once the season starts, you can only have so many padded practices also. Usually about after mid-season, no one's going out with pads on anymore. Or maybe you go out with pads on and you do 9-on-7 and a couple of team drills, and then you take the pads off. So yeah, I think that's a part of it.
and both of you guys always realized whenever we didn't stop the run or run the ball well, we had a scrimmage coming that week. I think that was part of our toughness. The other thing is, I do not think it was so much the hits rate right now. I think it's the conditioning and the mindset. We always knew that when we were out there and we were playing, if you left the field at the wrong time, you may not get back on there.
Right.
These guys aren't afraid of losing their jobs or anything. So I'm not one of those old guys that's saying when I played, I just look at the whole situation. The one thing, I just stopped being a uniform inspector for the last 27 years. With the pandemic, I think I took the rest of this year off. But one thing I saw that was really consistent among players, the ones that wanted to always break the rules about their uniform are the players that sometime during the game, they were undisciplined. The teams that tried to follow those rules, and you watch the teams now that follow those rules most of the time, those teams are winners. And I started looking at this whole mindset, like if a player got a chance to play or not, we used to be out there playing. Now they're not. And one thing I do know, as much as we hated it, we needed that training camp. And we needed, when we had bad games, to go in and take it out on each other.
Yeah. You missed our very first year, because in my very first game as a Patriot, as a pro, that was the game that OJ broke the record, set the record rather, 250 yards rushing. And his fullback, he got another 100 yards. So they had like over 350 yards rushing. That next week, we thought we were all going to get cut. So it was a relief to us that the next week we started practice again. But that next week, we were in full pads practicing against the run, running the ball and practicing the whole practice almost. So they don't have anything like that. And when we were used to be in training camp up in not Smithfield, but in the other place, what was the first place that we went to?
Amherst.
Springfield,
Amherst. Those days, you remember those days, Tony? We would be practicing. We had 2-a-days, and we didn't even know what day it was. It was so monotonous. It was practice, meeting, lunch, practice, meeting, go to bed. We didn't know whether it was Thursday or Monday. We had because we did the same thing every single day. And they don't do that now.
No.
And I think that's part of the game. You can say it's a toughness, or you can say it's a mindset, but at the same time, for you to be able to go home at night doing training camp, that's not training camp to me. For you to be able to only hit 5 to 7 times, and you know, I can sound like sour grapes, and I'm not, because I think at times I thought we hit too much. But at the same time, I can see now where it made us tougher. It's a lot of teams right now that if we were in our youth, they couldn't beat us.
And I remember looking forward to a game, because it's got to be a lot easier in the practice we just went.
And the players nowadays, they have put themselves in position to cut a lot of the stuff out in training camp. They don't want the OTAs and the long off season. They don't want to come to training camp and practice in pads every day. And all this stuff now is negotiated in the CBA. So that's what these players nowadays want. They don't want all that contact. They want to save themselves for the game. And when the game comes, you get some of these easy injuries. It's because of the lack of conditioning during training camp.
And I remember, we had a concussion protocol. I don't know if you guys remember it, but they'd ask you 3 questions. What day of the week is it? Who are we playing? And who's the president of the United States? I remember getting my bell rung one time and coming over to the sideline. Now, we'd memorize the answers, right? I remember getting my bell rung, come over to the sidelines. The doctor said, "What day is it?" I said, "Ronald Reagan." I got the right answer. It was the wrong question.
Well, wait a minute. You forgot the one, "Watch my finger." Remember that? One time we were playing Houston, And a matter of fact, they came back and beat us. Do you guys remember the game when we were leading them like 24 to 6 or 7 or something? They came back and beat us. Well, I remember Earl Campbell in that game, and I know it was about in the second quarter. I played everything perfect, made a hit on that big thigh, that number 28 thigh, what it was. The one thing that I can remember from then, the next time I was talking to the coach, it was at the end of the third quarter. I'm telling you.
He could lower his head. You know, a lot of people don't know this about Tony McGee, but he broke into the league probably before they started counting sacks. And Tony McGee we used to call him Mac the Sack, but in the history of the NFL, Tony finished his career with 106.5 sacks. And you know, that is in the top 25. In fact, that would put him in 25th position. And let me tell you the kind of neighborhood he'd be in. Pat Swilling had 107. Pat Swilling, the outside linebacker with the New Orleans Saints. Armstrong for years was lighting them up at end with the Miami Dolphins, and then Von Miller, who's still a current player with the Denver Broncos, and he has 106 sacks. He's still playing. He's going to get a few more than that, but right now Tony McGee is ranked 25th in the history of the NFL in sacks.
Wow, Pete, thank you. Ray, that just shut you right up, didn't it?
No, I'm taking full credit for that.
Right. You taught me what to do, right?
All that stuff. There's no doubt about it. Tony was our sack master, without a doubt.
Oh, he was a sack maker.
Yeah,
you know what?
We would depend on him. You know, when we needed a big play on defense, we would depend on Tony to come through with a big sack for us, or Julius or something like that. But Tony was definitely our number one guy as far as rushing the passer, and we all look for him to come through for us and make big plays, and he always did.
And I appreciate y'all guys saying that, but you know what, Ray? We looked at all our guys, and Pete, we always looked at you guys too, because we felt like the offensive and defensive line was the backbone of that team. Yeah. And when I can remember, I watch a lot of the highlights now because, and I'm gonna tell you what, I don't know, and I want to ask you guys this: when you're watching the highlights, sometimes you almost tear up. You know, when I look at all these players that's gone, and then I look at the opportunities we had, and you know, you get sentimental. I guess that's what old people do. But at the same time, I do remember always, yes, I used to get sacks, but it's always because these other guys were bringing pressure. So, you know, I was like some of them players that do. If I wasn't even near the sack, I'm going to jump up near it.
It's a different player now, too. You know, we get a sack, and we just kind of walk back to the huddle and, give each other, a high five or something like that. This guy's got freaking sack dances now and stuff like that. And it just, it's just crazy. But we had some talented, pass rushers. Rod Shelton and Nelly were excellent blitzers to get to the quarterback. Even though, I used to watch Julius Adams out of the corner of my eye because he had a knack for getting off the ball so freaking. So when Julius went, I went. We had some players that were very, very talented, and especially rushing the passer. Being able to get to the quarterback and finish it and getting him down was vital, and Tony could do that very well.
Well, you know what? I was talking to a guy yesterday, and I'll say his name. You guys remember him, but he never got a chance to really cut it loose the way he could. Art Moore.
Big Art.
Big Art. And the thing that was unique about him, you remember, Ray, he was 6'5" and had these big old gigantic legs, a very little upper body, but he ran like about a 4.6 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was extremely strong, especially lower body. He could just plow and just penetrate the whole backfield and disrupt everything.
And then we brought in Richard Bishop. Remember Richard Bishop? Yeah, he was the same. He was like that same body style that you guys all kind of had. You all look like you cut out of the same mold. You remember the time that we were at practice, he poked John Hanna in the eye through his face mask, and Helian, our trainer, if ice could fix it, that's all. I mean, that was his only remedy to anything was you could put some ice on it. So I looked over to the sidelines. John's got one of those one of those Gatorade cups, frozen water that he used to freeze in the freezer, pressed against his eyeball. You remember that? And he
Right.
got,
Every time.
John got no
Right
sooner
about
got
that,
better
Pete.
from that, and Dick Bishop poked him in the other eye.
Listen, Tony and I don't know if you recall this or not, but we were when we first got Bishop, he came from, I think, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
He came like the same day or the day before our preseason game. And Fritz played him in the game, and he jacked up the center, just almost lifted the guy off his feet. And Tony and I said, well, he cut about 3 guys on that play right there.
It was funny. He lifted him up, and Hank, all them got excited. Next day, we didn't see none of them guys there. All the Brown boys. Y'all remember the B-boys?
It was almost like it was like a forklift kind of deal, you know? But Bishop was extremely strong lower body. He had a knack for just jacking people up. And he was something else.
Well, you know what you don't realize, that one year that he played when Julius was out and he was starting, Bishop had like about 28 or 30 pressures, quarterback pressures.
Defensive end. Yeah.
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 Yeah. You guys had a pretty good secondary behind you too.
We made them.
Quarterbacks had to pull the ball down. They weren't throwing on time because they were getting blanket coverage by 2 great cornerbacks. And then you had Tim Fox. Was it Bobby Howard, wasn't it, in the secondary at safety?
Yeah, Bobby Howard he wasn't a safety. He was later on cornerback. At the time when we had Foxy and who else was number 25? I can't remember his name.
Prentice McCray.
Prentice was there at first, and then this young man came right after him. He was the fourth.
Rick Stanford.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually made those guys a whole lot.
Right. We don't even know their name. That's why we keep